Welcome to the Whatcom Dads podcast, where three guys who clearly make a ton of parenting mistakes share our experiences so you don't have to make the same ones. I'm Chris Roselli.
I'm Mark Bagley.
And I'm Nathan Dwyer. This week, Anne-Marie Reed returns to the show. She's a parent education instructor at Bellingham Technical College. And we're going to cover multiple topics with some short hypotheticals and scenarios. And then on Whatcom Dads Recommend, we share a local restaurant that might serve as a good spot to take your kid for a birthday dinner. Episode 19. Here we are, guys.
19 is kind of a weird age. So when you turn 18, no, 19 is weird. When you turn 18, all right, you're legal. Then you become 20 and you're 20 and then 21. But what's 19? 19 is just kind of...
You obviously did not go to college in Whatcom County.
Yeah.
No, turn 19, that means you get to go right across the border and drink beer in bars. That's what 19 gets.
I'm not from here. And so I guess it's a big deal if you're in Washington. Sure. If you're at a border county in Washington.
For Western students, when the border was open and there was no pandemic, 19 was a huge deal. Chris, what were the name of some of those places that were right across the border?
Yeah, there was China Beach. There's Chiboki's. There was there's some palace, I think.
Yeah, there was.
I went to China Beach and Chiboki's, and then I would go to like the Roxy in Vancouver. I'd go to different places in Vancouver.
I remember. I mean, this is like 1998, I guess. Like a Corona with a lime in it was super fancy, and you could get that in Canada for a couple loonies. I mean, we just thought we were living the life up there.
When I went up for I was 19 and I went up there. It wasn't my 19th birthday, but it was my first time up there. I was handing change to homeless folks who are on the street. And I didn't realize until a couple blocks down the road that I had given away like $20 in money because of all the toonies and loonies that I had handed out. I didn't realize what I was giving away. Learning experiences.
And there was always this fear that you were going to get pulled over into the lane to get searched on your way back in, but we hadn't done anything illegal. The drinking age was fine. The border people knew what was going on. But one time, this friend that was driving our car, they said, "What'd you go up there to do?" And we'd gone to the clubs or whatever. And she said, "Oh, we just went up for dinner." And the border agent said, "So why is there a stamp that says fill in the blank bar on your left hand on the steering wheel facing me?" And she was like, "Oh, well, we got searched that time."
So obviously 19 is a big deal up here. It wasn't a big deal for me, but obviously it's a big deal up here. So my apologies.
So next week will be episode 20. And I thought we should take a little bit of time to reflect on what's been going on in the last year. So we're going to spend next episode on how the pandemic has impacted parenting and what the last year's been like. It sort of coincides almost exactly with 1 year from when things really started to shut down. But it sort of got me thinking, now that we've done this for 18 episodes, are we doing a good job of not projecting that we really have this thing figured out? Are we making sure to remind listeners that we might be painting a rosy picture here on our weekly chat, but it's still a struggle and we're dealing with the same things that everyone else is?
I say it's our podcast. We can lie all we want. We're doing great, perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, especially during a pandemic, there's parents out there struggling. I think everyone's had to adapt and just do their best. And I think my hope, I often say that we give advice on the podcast. I think we should sort of change that mindset. I think we need to offer tools, if everyone has a toolbox, they can sort of select what's needed in their particular situation. And if they have some education or insight on how to use those tools. But I sort of feel like when we say we give advice, that's being a little heavy-handed, like you must be doing something wrong if you're not doing this. I don't think that's what we're trying to say. I think we're trying to offer alternatives to people. And then if you are struggling, maybe something else to give a chance.
Yeah, I just like to think that we're offering experiences, right? Things that we've dealt with, sometimes rather poorly. Sometimes we get lucky and do the right thing.
And I love having the experts that we bring on board because they're the ones who certainly know much better than we do. And so being able to utilize our experiences, hopefully, and be able to ask the right questions can help some of our listeners along the way.
Yeah. So if we say advice, we really mean just some stuff to think about and use. And if it doesn't work, that's great. It's again, we've said it many times. It's not a one size fits all sort of a scenario. Mark, one other thing. Last week you talked about taking your kids to the grocery store and buying the Matchbox cars. And so this Saturday morning, I was up a little early. 5-year-old Benjamin was up a little bit early. And so I said, hey, Ben, do you want to go to the grocery store with me and grab breakfast for everybody? And so, oh, yeah, that was great. So I realized Ben had not been in a grocery store in 1 year. And so we've been getting our groceries delivered for the most part. We've been, going individually, Amanda and I. So I took him in. It was pretty early. It wasn't busy. And man, just kind of like the wonderment to watch a 5-year-old walk around a grocery store, which he hasn't done for a year. He sort of remembered where some things were and was blown away that there was a bakery inside the grocery store. And we slowly walked along the seafood counter and looked at the crabs and the lobsters. And it was just like a great moment. And it reminded me that oftentimes when I want to have special time with my kids, like I might think, oh, we need to go to the trampoline zone or we need to go to a ball game. And gosh, just 30 minutes at the grocery store one-on-one, that one-on-one time was precious. The simple things sometimes are just as good as the fancy ones.
You're so right. And when Allie comes home, our 24-year-old, when she comes home for the weekend, she'll want to go grocery shopping with me still to this day because it's just such fond memories for her.
As we were driving home, I had picked up some other things that we needed for the rest of the day or the rest of the weekend. And so I said, are you excited to get home? We got some donuts and sausage. And he said, yeah, but we're also going to have the salad and the ramen noodles and the pasta for breakfast too. And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, you said we're going to go get stuff for breakfast. And I was like, oh, you thought everything we put in the cart was breakfast. He took it very literally. Why shouldn't he have? So, I had stocked up on butter. I had gotten popsicles. So poor guy thought, what are we having? So I need to remember that for a 5-year-old, you can't be literally. I needed to say, let's get some things for breakfast and some other groceries. All right, guys, I think we did pretty good with a listener mailbag question. I want to toss another one out there for discussion. This comes from our listener, Sean, and he writes in, and he's looking for tips on kids sharing and taking turns. And is being fair something worth attempting with your kids, or is it basically a losing, unobtainable battle? So, any thoughts on sharing and trying to make sure things are fair?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, sharing, yeah, you got to pay attention to sharing. It's, it's part of the golden rule, isn't it? Treat others like you want to be treated. I think that kids have got to understand because all throughout life you share and there's a give and take. So spend your time doing that. Amen.
Literally last night, I was painting my older daughter's toenails. I was giving her a pedicure. Yes, I give my daughter's pedicures. Pretty fun stuff. And it's terrible. Like there's polish everywhere and I just do a bad job. But the nail polish remover that we used was Alyssa's. It was my younger daughter's. And it became this issue of, did you ask me? Did you ask if you could use my nail polish remover? No, I didn't ask because you borrowed mine last time without asking me. And so for me, isn't it funny? Every parent knows of 2 children or more, the ongoing battle of, well, you didn't share last time, or you didn't loan something to me last time, or you didn't ask me last time. And so we had the conversation about how that spiral needs to end at some point, or else they're going to be 8 years old, still arguing over who loaned who what and who never asked for what and who never shared what.
The whole question about fairness, though, that's hard. I mean, sometimes it's going to be fair and sometimes it's not going to be fair. But how do you explain that to a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old? Life's not fair, but that's a tough lesson to try to convey to kids.
Yeah, especially young kids. We would always, I feel like, try to redirect if something wasn't fair. It's not fair. She got the device for 2 shows and I only got it for 1 show. And my response was always, oh, hey, well, how about you and I sit down and play a game together? And usually that would kind of end that pretty quickly. And so I would always try to redirect it a little bit as opposed to trying to answer really the impossible question, right? About, how do you make it fair? And
well, I think the important thing is fair does not mean equal. What is appropriate for my 2-year-old is not the same as what's appropriate for my 7. So I think my 7-year-old. So explaining that each child is apportioned things based on their needs rather than just a complete, the 7-year-old gets a bigger cookie than the 2-year-old. The 7-year-old can have, use of a electronic for longer than a 2-year-old. So I think that might be the first thing is fair does not always equate to equal. But like you said, Mark, I think teaching them that life isn't fair and there are going to be times where they're disappointed, upset, or angry, and just being able to show some empathy to the kid and say, it seems like you're upset about this because, or it seems like you're angry because, and what are some ways that we can work on this? And so, again, I'll advocate like I often do, let the kids do the problem solving. If you force them to share, they're not going to be able to think for themselves and do that as they get older. You're just going to continually have to step in. But if you can sort of sit back and observe what's going on, and if they're on the right track, you might guide, and there's going to be times you have to step in. But I really think sort of normalizing for them that sometimes things aren't fair. And I'm bummed out with you that this isn't fair. And let's figure out some solutions for the future.
And it just gets more intense, it seems, as the kids get older and they get to high school. And then there's things with friends and peer pressure and someone got invited somewhere and they didn't. And then you're really dealing with all those more mature emotions that are also hormonal. And then it really gets into some tough conversations. It's not easy, but Annette always looked at it, they're all learning opportunities. And if you approach it the right way, it just helps better prepare the kids for when they're off on their own, doing their own thing.
And lastly, I'll add that on this topic of fairness, this would be a good opportunity to talk to your kids about things that aren't fair and advocating for fairness on social justice issues or other things that are going on in the world. So maybe using that as a jumping off point to talk to your kids about what might be unfair out in the world and things that they can do as they get older to sort of stand up for those things which they believe are unfair.
Robinson & Kole Attorneys is proud to be a sponsor of the Whatcom Dads podcast. Located in downtown Bellingham, Robinson & Kole has been representing the injured and disabled of Whatcom County since 1979. If you or someone you know has been injured in an auto accident or suffered an on-the-job injury, call Robinson & Kole to schedule a free, no-obligation video consult with one of their 5 attorneys. Their attorneys have over 100 years of experience litigating cases against insurance companies and the Department of Labor and Industries. Call 360-671-8112 to schedule an appointment.
Well, listeners, we're in for a real treat. We have our first ever return guest tonight, and Anne-Marie Reed has joined us once again. If you missed episode 9, she is a parent educator at Bellingham Technical College. Do yourself a favor, go back and listen to episode 9 because she offered some great tips and tools for discipline. Each of us are going to take a couple of scenarios or hypotheticals and see what she would do with them. And so let's just check in real quick, Anne-Marie. It's been 12 weeks since you last joined us. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Hanging in there, looking forward to someday, hopefully relatively soon, getting the vaccine and getting life back a little more to normal.
All right, so who wants to kick us off?
Go ahead, Mark.
So let's just jump right into it. So Anne-Marie, when we last talked to you, we talked a little bit about punishment for kids, and you and I have a different philosophy, a different style. I will say here for everyone to hear that we did spank our kids, and I know that's not something that you believe in or think is a good way to discipline. But I want to talk a little bit about another form of corporal punishment and to get your take on it. So I was in the post office recently, and there was a family behind me, a mom and two girls, and the girls were probably 12 and 8. And they were playfully bickering, nothing terrible. But I heard the mom say to the older one, "If you keep that up, you'll be doing squats right here in the post office." And I thought, that's an interesting philosophy for punishment, is to make the kids do some sort of exercise. So I just wanted to get your take on that because it struck me as kind of odd.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my first thought is I appreciate that she wasn't threatening
Spanking?
physical harm, right? So, and if this was a 12-year-old, that's that it would be pretty hard to physically make a 12-year-old do something, right? Your parenting needs to shift a little bit because, a lot of 12-year-old girls are as big as their moms. So, so I'm glad she wasn't, threatening anything that way, because I think that would have backfired. I appreciate that she was trying to come up with something that, a consequence, if you will, that might have health benefits for her child, right? The issue I have with that is it would have been embarrassing for the 12-year-old to have to do that in public. And I don't think there's any room for embarrassment or being belittling or humiliating a child. So I would disagree with that. The other part that I would disagree with would be I like to try to make the consequence, if you will, be as related as possible to the infraction. And so it would be hard for, how do you make this related? She's bickering with her sister. Well, maybe if she was the one who was instigating it, if she was, and who knows if she was or not, but let's say that she was at fault, then I would be more inclined to say, well, what could you do to do something to make amends to your sister, right? You made a mistake with your sister. How can you basically fix your mistake? So I would want to hold her accountable, but I would want to try to make it meaningful and related, and respectful and reasonable, the 3 R's of consequences.
So one of the concerns I had is tying a consequence or discipline with exercise. And in my mind, that could lead to exercise being a negative thing for that child, which I don't think is a good thing, because you don't want to tie a positive into a negative. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And that I immediately thought of that as you was describing the situation too. It's sort of like, you say you have to finish all that broccoli before you can have some cake. Right? So making that broccoli all the more yucky and that cake all the more luscious. And the same kind of a thing here, making physical activity a negative, where, right, my goodness, our society, we need to really turn that one around. We have enough problems with that as it is. So yes, I agree with you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
I think we've all been in that situation where you're in the grocery store and something comes up with your kid. And sometimes I'm stuck between like waiting till we're outside the store in private to address it and trying to address it there in front of other people. Yeah. If you don't address it there, people might look at you and say, "Oh, that dad's not dealing with it." And I know that with my age kids, the sooner you do it, it makes more sense because they're not going to remember 20 minutes later when you're outside the store. But any tips just on sort of how to either handle it in a public situation or remove yourself from the public situation?
Yeah, it is hard. It's hard when you're in public because you do feel judged, right? And, for better or worse, people are watching you, and some people are wonderful and just give you kind of a knowing smile, like, yep, been there,
in there.
You're doing a great job. Or other people who are like, what is wrong with you? Right. I mean, really judging you. So it's hard. I think you have to take it on a kind of a case by case basis and by how you're feeling too, kind of your inner strength, whatever you're feeling in that moment. I mean, there definitely were times with my toddlers, who were just losing it at the grocery store. And there was no, I might try to distract them and that just wasn't working. And it became very clear we just needed to leave. And it was a consequence to me because I didn't get to finish the errand. And I was really angry. But it was clear that my kid was just beside themselves and that we weren't going to get anywhere and we just needed to get out and have some space. So I think it depends on the age and kind of where you're at too.
Well, you mentioned, the bickering, and of course, it's funny. That's one of the questions that I have is, when do we intervene when our kids are bickering with one another versus, of course, we like to ignore, so let them problem solve themselves. But sometimes there's that point of no return where it's like, all right, we need to step in now. And so I would love to get your take. Lexi and Alyssa are 12 and 14.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, during COVID, the walls have gotten smaller and smaller in the house. And of course, we get shorter and shorter sometimes with the kids as we've been around them more. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Sure. So my first thought, when kids are having trouble getting along, when do you step in large part is going to depend on their ages, their developmental abilities. I mean, certainly if you've got, a little one who can't problem solve yet, a toddler, you're going to be stepping in. Right. You've got maybe a preschooler and a toddler. That toddler can't problem solve yet. So you're going to be stepping in much more. With your age children at 12 and 14, I wouldn't be stepping in very often. But there would be times, I mean, and every family can tell, right? There's that kind of that threshold, that tone, if you will, or that thud, right? That when you need to step in, right? And it'll be different for every family. Every family has their own threshold, right? Bottom line is it's going to be different for every family. I think as kids are able to problem solve, we should not be stepping in quickly. We should be taking our time with that, walking slowly, right, to the altercation, and then really judging how much we step in. So as I'm a nurse, and one of the things that I learned was you intervene at the lowest level that you can. Like, you're not going to go straight to surgery if an aspirin will do, right? And I take the same approach with parenting. So I'm going to start low and then I'll build from there as I need to. So I'm with your girls, I might say, oh, I hear two girls who are having trouble getting along, and just kind of shout that out. And they're old enough that, that actually might work, right? I'm not going to say it's going to work every time, but it might. And that's, we got to ring it back a little bit. So, so bottom line, with your age kids, I probably wouldn't be getting involved very quickly, but knowing where that threshold is. If I felt like things were close to blows, or if their arguing was getting very mean-spirited, name-calling, hurt feelings, then I might step in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So let's say your child is dating someone who mom and dad just know isn't right and is causing behavioral changes or undue stress on your child because of the dating situation they're in, but they are so invested and think they're so in love that they can't see it. What should mom and dad do in that situation?
Boy, that's hard. So are you talking about college age kids right now, or are you talking about high schoolers?
High school age kids.
Okay.
Maybe just, kind of starting dating and trying to figure the whole thing out. And
gotcha. So they're still living at home and
yes.
So I think, when you parent a teen, it is a bit of a shift in your parenting where you, I don't think you can be quite as directive as maybe you had been when they were younger. It's more of a mentor or a coached kind of relationship. So I think if I were to, just flat out and tell my teen, this guy is no good for you. Look at how he's treating you. You're just a doormat for him. I don't think that's going to go over very well. And if anything, that's probably going to drive my daughter more toward this guy, right? So I would be more inclined to just ask a lot of guiding questions. So tell me what you like about him. I know you really like him. Tell me what it is you like about him. How do you think a boyfriend should treat his girlfriend? That kind of a thing, to hopefully help her discover it a little bit more, right? That would be an approach that at least I would start with, for sure. And then if I really noticed some things that I was really worried about, I'm going to say it like that. Honey, I'm really worried. This relationship I see with your boyfriend, I know you really care about him, but I look at how it's affecting you and how you are, I don't know, cutting yourself or not eating or, whatever. And I'm really worried about that. And
I think you got to get to that point eventually where you are calling it out by what you're seeing, whether it's emotional, hopefully not physical. I mean, emotional is terrible as well. But I think as parents, we really have that obligation.
I agree.
And some kids, that may push them closer to that person who is not treating them well. But hopefully if it's a healthy family relationship, there might be some tension amongst the child and the parents initially, but hopefully the child will realize, understand that the parents have their best interest in mind and possibly be able to step back and say, oh my gosh, you're right. I had no idea. This is now how I act, or this is what's happening to me. So,
right.
Yeah. So Chris is what you have this to look forward to, Chris.
So excited.
It's great. It's great.
So I'd like to ask about something I've been thinking about since we launched this podcast. We're sort of putting ourselves out there, providing tips, tools, advice. How do you make suggestions to people about parenting without sounding judgmental, making them defensive? I want to help people, but I want to balance that with, trying not to offend or make them take a step back and say, oh, you don't think I'm doing this right?
Right. And you are so spot on, Nathan. You have to be so careful about that because parenting is so personal, right? And people can feel I think if we're honest, most of us will second guess ourselves, right? Like, am I really doing the right thing here? And so, we're kind of fragile in our parenting, and people are very worried about being judged. So I really, really work hard when I'm working with parents to make myself vulnerable. So I share the mistakes that I have made because I know by doing that it lets everybody know that I'm not perfect and that this is a safe place where we can be authentic and we can support each other. So I think that's super important too. That would be one way that you could do it, is just, oh man, I remember when that happened to me and I did this and it was such a mistake, or, whatever. Right. So kind of just making yourself vulnerable. I think that's a big one. And that helps put other people at ease. And then I don't give advice unless people ask. Depending on the situation, sometimes addressing the child is a way to do that is a little less threatening for the parent. So I'll give you an example. I was at the grocery store by myself, which was a minor miracle. And there was a mother and a little 2-year-old, her daughter, with her. And the mother was looking at some of the displays. We were in line for the checkout. And the mother was looking at some of the displays right in front of the checkout stand. And the little daughter was below her looking at the displays and touching them. And she wasn't hurting anything, but she was touching some of the displays. And the mother got pretty, I don't know if she thought I was judging, but she got pretty firm with her 2-year-old and slapped her hand and said, "No touching." And I let that moment calm a little bit. And I really do think the mother was feeling judged by my seeing it. And so after the moment calmed, I just addressed the little girl in front of the mother. And I said, "Oh, those are really pretty things. They're hard not to touch, aren't they?" And so I addressed the child, so it wasn't quite as threatening to the parent, but the parent absolutely knew that I'm not judging, and this is actually really developmentally appropriate that this kid was touching this stuff, especially since her mom was touching it too.
So, but if I can follow up, Anne-Marie, what do you do though if one of your child's friends doesn't behave appropriately at your home, or if you have people over to your home and their kids are running wild and jumping on the furniture? And do you call them out right there? Do you pull the parents aside? And how do you do that?
Well, Mark, I got bolder in my older age. Okay. and so if it's my home, it's my rules, right? And I feel I don't have a problem actually just restating the rule for a little visitor who is over, right? So, in our house, we don't jump on the sofa, right? We use walking feet or whatever. So I just restate the rule, right? And if it continues, which, some kids it will, say, if you can't follow the rules at our house, I see it's going to be time for you to go home. And I'll do it. I'll follow through with it.
So what do you do if it's a party and the parents are there as well?
So I might, depending on the situation, I might bring my kid into it, right? So let's say, and this absolutely will happen. So in our house, we didn't jump on the sofa, right? And I walk in and, my kid and his little friend are jumping on the sofa, right? And little kids' parents are right there with me and say, "Oh, Matthew, will you remind your friend what our rule is about the sofa?" And so I can kind of put it on my kid to remind him the rule, right? Which, my kid knows the rule. My kid shouldn't have been doing it either, right? Mm-hmm. So, but that can be a way to hold them both a little bit accountable that way. And again, putting it on the kids in a respectful way, without hopefully the parents feeling like I'm stepping in too much.
Right. Or you can make them do 180 sit-ups.
No, rock hard abs.
So, Anne-Marie, how do we help our teenage daughters contribute more to household responsibilities without having to be asked? And I mean, they do, and I'm not talking about like cleaning their room or making their beds or doing dishes, but I'm talking about like just basic little things, like instead of walking over their shoes that are in the middle of the entryway, to actually just pick them up and go put them away. So doing a variety of those little things that are just the things you do to contribute to the household responsibilities.
Yeah. And the teens, can be a difficult age when it comes to household responsibilities because they're not important to them, right? And so a teen will do great if it's something that's important to them. But if it's not, if they don't buy into it, they're not interested, right? So I think that would be a time when I would probably use a strategy of a family meeting. And so, not in the heat of the moment, let things calm down where, your emotions aren't high and theirs aren't high. And then just come together and say, our family meeting, you try to make it pleasant, not a BITCH session, right? So something pleasant, maybe have a nice dessert out, and say, I've noticed that things are being left around the house, right? And a bit of a tripping hazard, and it wears me down seeing it, right? And so I could really use your help with this. Let's talk about this. What could we do to help each other to help the family run smoother? Are there any things that you would like me to do to help the family run smoother? And what are some things that you could do to help the family run smoother? So you really want to try to involve them, not being directive, telling them what to do, but letting them brainstorm and come up with ideas that you can work together and cooperatively. And then there'll be more of the buy-in.
And by the way, listeners, we did actually talk about family meetings way back in episode 1, and it's been really useful. And it's funny, Anne-Marie, that you mentioned the family meeting piece. I threw this question together, and I asked Amy, my wife, what do you think about this question? And Amy looked at me and said, well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Look whose shoes. So perhaps our family meeting is also going to be how I will do my part as well. We can all work hard together.
Well, once again, Emery, this has been great. I just realized that you were on episode 9 and now you've been on episode 19. There's a pattern there. Maybe we can continue this with a sort of every 10th episode or so. But before we let you go, would you once again remind our listeners, maybe if they hadn't listened before, the classes you teach and how they could sign up for those at Bellingham Technical College?
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, actually registration is open right now for spring quarter. Spring quarter will start, I think it's the week of the 11th of April, if I'm remembering right. And I teach classes. I teach infant classes. So this is where parents come with their infants. And those classes for spring quarter are free. And so we have a 1 to 7 month class and an 8 to 12 month old class. And then we have toddler classes, so a 1-year-old class and a 2-year-old class. I teach a 2-year-old class. Again, this is parents and their twos. And then we have more than one, which are where parents come with more than one child, siblings typically, but not necessarily, or older preschoolers, because we don't have a 3s and a 4s class. So they would just come to the more than one class. And with the pandemic, I'm doing it where we meet for a half hour, 9 to 9:30 for a literacy circle, singing and reading and puppet play, where I'm getting at a lot of social skills. And then it's working really well. I'm just so impressed how well it's working. And then from 1 to 2 is a parent discussion time. And this is where parents have chosen the topics for the quarter. And we have a topic each week that we get into some depth with. And then parents in those classes also have an opportunity to meet with me one-on-one throughout the quarter via Zoom right now.
Well, in our house, my little ones are enrolled in the more than one class. And on that particular day of the week, sometimes I come downstairs on my way to work and they're on Zoom with Anne-Marie and they're wearing, was it costume day or?
Disguise. We were wearing disguises.
Disguises. Yes. And my 3-year-old's disguise was simply that she held her hands in front of her face. She was hiding that way. So it's always really fun that day of the week to catch what they're doing on for a few minutes before I head out the door. Yeah, so thanks again for doing that. It's great for the community, and our family has been big fans. So thanks again for your time, Anne-Marie.
Of course. Happy to do it. Thank you for having me.
This week on Whatcom Dads Recommend, we are going to recommend some places that we think would be a good spot to take your child for a special birthday dinner. We know that restaurants are slowly opening up and more opportunities out there, and many of which still offering outside service and a more reduced capacity inside. Let's go through and sort of indicate where the place is, what kind of food they have, what you like to order, and what makes it a special spot.
Well, a place that we would take we've taken our kids to for birthday dinner was Chihuahua's here in Ferndale. And this is probably true for most any Mexican restaurant, but it's fun because they typically bring out the big sombrero and sing happy birthday to the person who is celebrating. And when you're with little kids, that can be kind of fun, a little embarrassing, of course, but kind of fun. And who doesn't like Mexican food? You can always find something to order on the menu, whether it's just the chips and maybe some guacamole to a cheese enchilada to something a little bit more elaborate. So that was always fun for us. And then another thing that we did was, I think I mentioned this in an earlier podcast, is we love going to Xing's Panda Palace in Sunset Square, because in their little side room they have the big Lazy Susan, and you can put the food on the Lazy Susan and spin it around, and that was always fun for Ben in particular to watch the food go around. So those are the kind of two places that we would take our kids.
So when you bring your family out to dinner, anymore, it can easily be $100 to have dinner with your family of four. And so for us, trying to find a restaurant that's got an affordable kids menu, or something along those lines, especially for like a burger, I'm finding that like a lot of hamburgers in town anymore with the side is easily $20 now for a burger and fries. And so anyway, we asked Alyssa this last week for her birthday where she wanted to go, and she had two choices. One was El Rinconcito, which she loves. We love that local Mexican restaurant, and also Red Robin. And we ended up going to Red Robin, and
Yum.
you can get a yum. and you can get, I got a Royal Burger, which is like their 3rd-pound burger with an egg and cheese and all this other yummy stuff on it, and it's under $13. And then it's unlimited sides, right? So Alyssa gets their mac and cheese, Lexi gets her food. They made Alyssa stand up on a chair and everybody sang, and they just make birthday kids feel super celebrated, which we've always really appreciated about that place.
That's great.
Yeah, we did that too. That was a favorite for the kids too. Thanks for reminding, Chris. That was always a fun place to go.
When I was a student at Western, Red Robin was like the place to work. It was legitimately like where the cool kids worked. That and the Gap. One of those two things is no longer cool. So my kids are not quite up for this restaurant because it has scared them in the past. The Kyoto Steakhouse, which is Bellingham's version of a hibachi steakhouse, sort of like a Benihana. And you get the show, right? Your chef is out there chopping your food, flipping it over. Please get the fried rice, because that's so much more fun to watch get made than the white rice. But yeah, just... they have family portions, they have a kids menu, and you can share really easily. So we usually go for the steak and shrimp, and plenty to go around. And if you get a good hibachi chef, he can really make a fun time and make it special for your kid.
Thanks again to Anne-Marie Reed for joining us today. And thank you to our sponsor, Robinson & Kole, Northwest Washington's premier injury law firm. There is a link to their website in our show notes.
Please remember to rate and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. New episodes are released Friday mornings. Also, we are still looking for future topics and guests, as well as mailbag questions. So email us at whatcomedadspodcast@gmail.com. or reach out to us through our Facebook page.
Next week for episode 20, we will interview a 3rd grade teacher about remote learning. Our wives will return to discuss parenting during the pandemic, and the dads will reflect on our first 20 episodes. What kind of key can never unlock a door?
Monkey.
A monkey!
So alligators can live up to 100 years, which is why there is an increased chance that they will see you later.
That's a good one.
Well, I guess continuing on the animal theme, why doesn't a teddy bear ever have dessert? Because he's stuffed.
And this is a write-in from our guest last week, Ross. What is the number one cause of dry skin? Towels.
Good one, Ross.
Very good, Ross.